Procure to Pay. In this unit, we will discuss the procurement functionalities within Ariba. The Ariba Cloud Procurement Suite is not only suitable for making requisitions and sending them through approvals, ordering and having them received, but it can also cover the financial tasks of reconciling invoices until the payment is cleared. One of the strengths of the functionality is its ability to leverage all the planning phase, which includes the transfers from the awarding of an RFP or a contract all the way up to catalogs. It is also natively embedded within the Ariba network, which provides close collaboration with the suppliers during the procurement process. The next unit after this will discuss the different options for the scoping, while this one will focus on the functionalities of the solution. Let's remember that fundamentally, the process of procurement is to raise purchase orders, then having them received and matched against an invoice for good compliance. Let's look at this in another context. One interesting fact is that the first space shuttle that was sent into space by NASA had fuel tanks on the side that were a little bit too small, according to the optimal size of the engineers. And the reason came from the fact that those fuel tanks needed to go through a train tunnel. Now, the width of this tunnel is based on the gauge of the British railway tracks, which were designed at the end of the 19th century to fit inside existing roads. And the width of those roads were standardized pretty much throughout Europe. The size is roughly 2 horses side by side. And this was standardized by an edict of Imperial Rome at the height of the empire. Now, why do you think I'm telling you about this? Well, when you think about it, a bureaucratic measure taken by a civil servant in Imperial Rome made it all the way up to space 2,000 years later. Now, the question that I often ask companies that I visit is your procurement process the result of doing it the same way as your predecessor did, or was it efficiently designed? So let's look at how Ariba does procurement. The core issue we often see are companies having a silo approach to their work. Each group work in their own, by themselves, and have limited interactions with the other groups. Each ones are in their own silo. Two very large silos are the ones between procurement and finance. Two other ones are the silos between a company or a buyer and their suppliers. And the reason for those silos is most of the time because the process is paper-based and there is limited possibilities to improve the collaboration between those. The biggest results of this is the lack of control, which in turn springs leakage and additional costs. If someone raises a purchase order by typing freely a text description of what is needed and sends it to a supplier that is known to him, and then sends this order by fax, then it becomes a little bit difficult to reconcile when an invoice comes in. It's hard to know if a contract was not respected or if the price used was the one discussed. So what needs to be done? By bringing every silos together and concentrate them into a tool, processes, and technology, all the people will derive a common vision to achieve compliance and procurement. The entire process gets redesigned for efficiency. When accounts payable and procurement collaborate and they use similar tools, a lot of duplicate works disappears. When an invoice comes in and the system automatically detects that it is linked to a purchase order that was not received and sends a notification to the requester to do his reception without involving accounts payable, it automates an important part of the process. This is just one example of many others where automation can sharpen everything in the same way. And lastly, but not least, it is also key to involve the supplier into collaborating with your procurement. The supplier needs to take an active approach to providing price and compliant invoices or contract invoices or expediting status for delivery, for example. In return, the supplier will receive visibility about his payment, and he doesn't need to pick up the phone. Let's look here what is a paper-based process versus an automated process. In the paper-based process, when an employee needs to order something, such as a computer mouse, they go online and find what they want. Then they print out or walk to their manager or send an email to have it approved. At that point, they walk to the fax machine and fill a fax form to send this purchase order to their supplier. After a couple of days, if everything is still silent, they might pick up the phone and call the company to check if the order was received. And after 2 weeks, for example, if the mouse is not delivered, they will pick up the phone again to check what is the status about delivery. And when it does get delivered, the employee has to go back into the ERP screen and create a reception document, which in many cases, he doesn't bother to do. The paper invoice is received and opened by the clerk in accounts payable that will then put the invoice on a scanning machine, digitalize it, and with some level of automation will transfer the paper data into electronic form to the ERP. At that point, often because the process was very long, the supplier picks up the phone and calls to know when he's going to be paid. Every single step involved here human beings. Now, there is an important trend in procurement at the moment where low-value items, such as a mouse, don't need to get approved. It's not worth the time of the manager. They also like to use the shipping information to convert this into a receipt. Let's walk through the electronic scenario. In this scenario, the same employee goes into the internal portal of the company and finds a mouse and orders it. It is automatically approved and automatically converted into a purchase orders and sent electronically to the supplier. The supplier's ERP automatically acknowledges this order and provides the status back. When this status or when this order is ready to be shipped, the ERP of the supplier will also send shipping information, including the transport or the tracking of the courier, for example. The shipping notice is used by the buyer's ERP to create a goods receipt, so when the electronic invoice gets in, it is automatically matched to the purchase order and the goods receipt. The invoice is auto-clear for payment. In this story, the only time a human being was involved was when the employee searched for a mouse at the beginning of the process. And this is not a fairy tale. We have several Fortune 1000 companies that reaches out 60, 70, 80% rate of automation when it comes to matching invoices to purchase order without involvement of human beings. This story is the reason that electronic tickets exist for flying. The airline industry realized that carbon copy and paper tickets didn't provide any value. By shifting all the work to their clients, meaning you, they did not need to staff the process. They didn't need to have anybody involved into buying, preparing, registering, or even doing the check-in. Ariba is trying to do the same in procurement, but instead of flight tickets, we're talking about purchase orders and invoices. Before going into the demonstration, let's realize that each of the silos, if you want, have different needs. Procurement will be focused on making sure that what is ordered gets delivered quickly and in the condition that they ordered. Because they have at their heart the good running of the business, this implies that everything needs to be delivered on time. Accounts payable, on their side, will be more concerned about paying for what was really delivered and minimize the risks and abuses. They will also try to make sure that the payment terms are met and they don't get penalty for late payment. But as a whole business, you want to make sure that those two processes converge, that the ordering, contracting, and legal aspect of the chain are managed hand in hand by procurement and accounts payable, and that rich reporting can provide exactly what is the picture of the spend that got ordered, that is received, invoiced, and paid. We're going to start this demo by shopping in the internal catalog. This looks very much like what you can find on consumer websites. You search for an article, you review what you want, and when you're ready, you add it to a shopping basket. At this point, this purchase requisition is ready to be approved. Let me come back here for a second. Oh, sorry, my watch is sending me a notification. I've got something on my mobile. So let's look at this. Ariba Mobile, I have the app here. I need to log in. Yeah. And then what do I see? Oh yeah, I see I've got work to do. 17 things to approve. So let's look at this. I see here the list of requisition. First aid kit, 5K US dollars. Let's look at the details. Note that the original requisition was made in euros, so we support currencies. So this is all fine, so I'm gonna go back here and approve and give a little, yeah, thanks here. And there we are, I've done my approval. So for casual users, a lot of things can be done straight out of the mobile. It even includes the requisition and the shopping in the catalog that you saw earlier on. So this has now become a purchase order. So let's continue the demo with the supplier side. We now see the supplier screen. And the supplier sees that he has 9 purchase orders that were sent by his client. He looks at the list, and this first one here is that first aid kit that was sent. The purchase order contains all the information he needs to be able to respond and send the request. Now he's going to confirm this entire order. The confirmation means that he will state that he can deliver, and he can even provide estimated shipping dates. Later, he could even send a tracking information about the delivery, such as the courier tracking number, for example. So we're back into procurement, and there the user needs to receive. He needs to state that he has received the entire quantity and it has been delivered in good form. He can accept just a partial amount of the quantity, but here he's going to accept it all and submit. Now, the next step is the supplier sending an invoice. And you're going to see that this invoice is not going to be as easy as he wants. We're going to put a little policeman in there. So you see here all the fields have been pre-populated from the purchase order. But this is a bit of a sneaky supplier. He's trying to augment the quantity. And the system says you are not allowed to augment the quantity from the purchase order. You need to respect the purchase order. And several rules will apply here to make sure that the invoice is compliant before it is sent. So the supplier fills all the necessary fields into the screen and updates his invoice. Now the invoice has been transmitted back to the buyer side. This invoice now appears in Ariba Procure to Pay. We can see here the summary of the purchase requisition, an amount of 100 that has been acknowledged, an amount at 100 that has been received. And we can also see the invoice that has been reconciled with this purchase order. This invoice had an exception because the reception was done after, so it was cleared automatically when the receipt was done by the employee. And this invoice triggered a payment, and in some regions of the world, you can have discounting on the payments. If you want to be paid faster, the supplier can offer a discount, for example. Let's just finish by going back to the supplier who also sees that payment, and this avoids phone calls. Now, to conclude here, my message is that compliance should be enforced by the system. Each teams need to collaborate. And when they're all in the same tool, everybody speaks the same language.